10:00 a.m. London time excerpts from a newly released royal biography. The rise and fall of the House of York hit headlines across the UK and beyond, but it wasn't the book's insight into dynastic politics that sent shockwaves through the palace walls. It was one chilling quote attributed to Prince Andrew buried deep in Chapter 9. Marrying Meghan is the worst mistake of his life. She's a climber too old for him that won't last a month. Within hours, the quote ignited an all-out firestorm. Andrew's Harry surged to the top of UK Twitter, tabloids splashed it across front pages, and royal commentators scrambled for clarification. But the story wasn't about the quote alone, it was about what came after. For once, Prince Andrew, the disgraced Duke, largely sidelined from public life, since the Epstein scandal was the one throwing punches, and this time they landed squarely in the center of the Sussex narrative. The claim as presented in the book dated back to 2018, reportedly made just days before Prince Harry and Meghan's wedding during a private conversation at Royal Lodge. According to the book's author, a former palace aide, and longtime royal biographer Andrew, had warned Harry in no uncertain terms, "She's not one of us. She's here for status, not family." That statement, whether entirely accurate or not, was the matchstick. Sources inside the palace, speaking on background, confirmed that Harry became visibly furious upon reading the quote, and that the remark had been a point of bitter contention between the two princes for years. But what set this incident apart wasn't just the re-emergence of Andrew's hostility, it was the timing and the potential motive behind why such a quote would be made public now. Andrew, once stripped of his royal duties and public-facing roles due to sexual abuse allegations, and his ties to Jeffrey Epstein had largely faded into the background, his appearances rare, his influence seemingly reduced to whispers and backrooms. And yet here he was again, casting public judgment not on politics or protocols, but on Meghan Markle, the woman his nephew left the monarchy to protect. The backlash was swift and ferocious. Major news outlets questioned why a man with such damaged credibility was being platformed at all. What moral authority does Prince Andrew have to judge anyone's marriage? One anchor asked Leave on Sky News. Even royal insiders privately acknowledged the optics were disastrous, a disgraced royal throwing shade at a woman of color who had already weathered years of press brutality. But if Andrew's comment was intended to provoke it, succeeded beyond imagination. Because behind closed doors, it didn't just resurface old wounds. It may have reopened an entirely new front in the war between the Windsors. Two royal spares, one disgraced, one exiled, now stood on opposite sides of a battlefield with Meghan once again in the middle. And this time the confrontation wouldn't stay hidden. Multiple outlets from The Telegraph to Page 6 began reporting on a now infamous private family meeting in which tensions between Andrew and Harry allegedly escalated into something far more personal and possibly physical. While Harry would go on to deny any altercation, the story had already taken on a life of its own. But what the public didn't yet know, what palace aides were scrambling to contain, was that what happened after Andrew's quote went viral would soon plunge the royal family into another crisis. Because what transpired behind palace doors following that leak, a confrontation so heated it's been described as unprecedented, is now being pieced together from multiple leaks, and one version includes something far more explosive than words. The storm that erupted in the press over Andrew's comment was nothing compared to the fury that unfolded behind palace walls. According to multiple sources familiar with internal discussions, the quote didn't just revive old resentments. It shattered what little remained of civility between Prince Harry and Prince Andrew. The confrontation reportedly took place days after the book's release during what was initially framed as a routine family consultation held discreetly at Windsor, away from cameras and aides. But as more details have emerged, it's become clear this meeting was anything but routine. It was explosive. A well-placed royal staffer who requested anonymity described the atmosphere as cold electric and minutes from combustion. Harry, who had flown in from California on short notice, was said to be visibly on edge. Andrew, meanwhile, appeared indifferent, even amused, as though the backlash from the biography had somehow emboldened him. That was when things reportedly took a turn. One source claimed that after a heated exchange in which Harry demanded a public retraction, or at the very least, a private apology, Andrew responded with a dry smile and said, "If you want to talk about disgrace, I'd suggest starting with your Netflix specials." What followed has now become the subject of intense media speculation and palace damage control. Several outlets have reported that a physical altercation broke out. The Sun even ran a bold headline claiming Harry punched his uncle in the face, leaving Andrew with a bloodied nose. Others suggest a shoving match or a chair being knocked over, with conflicting accounts offered by insiders, ranging from palace aides to adjacent staff at the Windsor estate. And then in a carefully timed move, Harry issued a direct rebuttal. Through People magazine, there was no physical fight, and Prince Andrew never said those things about Meghan. It's fiction, plain and simple. The statement, rather than quelling the flames, only fanned them. Why issue such a forceful denial if there was truly nothing to hide? Why choose people a US-based outlet instead of the British press? And why now? Online discourse split sharply. One side saw the denial as proof of media overreach and character assassination. The other viewed it as classic deflection, the kind that follows when the truth threatens to be even more damaging than the rumors. Meanwhile, Meghan remained entirely silent. No posts, no comments, no statements. But her absence only deepened the intrigue. Was she stunned by the revelation, strategizing the next move? Or was this yet another palace firestorm she'd learned to weather by staying still? And then came the most unexpected development of all. Late Tuesday evening, an unnamed source within the Windsor security team leaked a detail previously unreported: the existence of surveillance footage. Not of the fight itself, no cameras were placed inside the meeting chamber, but from the corridor directly outside. The footage, reviewed internally by palace aides and since described in whispers to multiple journalists, doesn't show fists flying. But it does show Andrew arriving nearly 20 minutes early carrying a small folder, and more surprisingly, a printed copy of a tabloid article featuring Meghan on the cover. He didn't come to talk, the source said. He came to provoke. But that folder and what Andrew allegedly said as he dropped it on the table may be the key to unraveling who escalated the feud and whether Harry was pushed to the edge on purpose. For days, the headlines had fed a familiar narrative. Harry, hot-headed and impulsive, had let his emotions spiral out of control. The image of a man throwing punches in defense of his wife or his pride painted him yet again as the royal rebel who couldn't control his temper. But the surveillance footage, quietly circulated among senior palace aides, began to unravel that version of events piece by piece. The stills showed Prince Andrew arriving far earlier than expected, walking briskly into the private chamber with a dark leather folder tucked tightly under his arm. He paused briefly outside the room, looked both ways, and then entered. 20 minutes later, Harry arrived, shoulders tense, phone in hand, expression unreadable. What happened next wasn't caught on video, but testimony from two adjacent aides who overheard the start of the meeting through the chamber door has now come to light. According to those sources, Andrew placed the folder on the table in front of Harry, opened it slowly, and revealed a printed copy of a tabloid spread the kind Meghan has long fought against, with her face on the cover beneath the headline, "The Duchess and the Diva is Meghan. Too much for Hollywood and Harry." But it wasn't the article itself that triggered the confrontation. It was what Andrew reportedly said next. "You built your kingdom on her victimhood," he told Harry in a low, controlled voice. "Don't be surprised when it collapses." The words hit harder than any physical blow. For Harry, who had given up his titles, his country, and his royal privilege to shield Meghan from the firestorm of UK press, the insinuation wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. According to one aide who spoke on condition of anonymity, Andrew knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't a slip, it was an ambush. And that's when the narrative began to flip. Far from being a reactive aggressor, Harry in this version was being provoked, cornered, pushed into a public relations trap. If he reacted physically, the palace could dismiss him as unstable. If he remained silent, Andrew's venom would hang in the air unchallenged. It was a classic playbook: bait the target, leak the conflict, discredit the defender. And the timing made it worse. With Meghan weeks away from relaunching a public-facing project in the US, any scandal, especially involving Harry, could taint their brand before it even began. As whispers of this new version began to spread, public sentiment shifted subtly but unmistakably. Hashtags like #ProtectMeghan and #HarryWasProvoked began trending alongside #AndrewTrap. Even former critics of the Sussexes paused to reconsider. One political columnist tweeted, "If Prince Andrew of all people is the one planning stories and stirring drama, what does that say about who's really being protected in this family?" And the more scrutiny was applied, the more suspicious it all became. Why was Andrew in possession of a media article not yet publicly printed unless someone inside the press had coordinated with him? Why was he allowed to attend the meeting alone with no oversight, given his history of scandal and emotional volatility? It was no longer about whether Harry hit Andrew. It was about why this confrontation had happened at all and who wanted it to explode. But the most damning evidence hadn't surfaced yet. Because just as the tide began to turn in Harry's favor, a leaked email from Andrew's personal communications advisor, timestamped 2 days before the meeting, began circulating in journalist inboxes. And that email, with one chilling subject line and a single bolded sentence, may prove that Andrew's actions weren't just personal, they were part of a strategy to sabotage Harry and Meghan from within. The email was short, only 3 paragraphs, but what it revealed sent tremors through royal aides, media consultants, and anyone who had clung to the hope that this was merely a personal clash between two troubled men. Sent from a private account belonging to Andrew's longtime communications advisor, the subject line was blunt: "Time to trigger the Sussex reset." The message, dated 2 days before the Windsor meeting, outlined a proposal for what it called a controlled provocation strategy. Its goal to bait Harry into a public or private misstep that could be leaked to the press, thereby framing him as emotionally unstable and Meghan as a divisive influence once again. And the motive to neutralize the Sussexes' narrative, hold before Meghan's next high-profile media rollout. But it was one sentence highlighted in bold that stunned even seasoned crisis experts. If he lashes out, we regain the upper hand. If he walks away, he looks weak. Either way, we win. There was no longer any ambiguity. This wasn't spontaneous tension or unresolved family bitterness. It was orchestration. A reputational ambush engineered from within the royal ecosystem using Andrew disgraced, but still connected as both the messenger and the landmine. The reaction within the palace was swift and divided. Some senior aides reportedly urged immediate internal review, fearing the backlash if the public ever got hold of the email. Others, still loyal to the traditional hierarchy, tried to contain the leak, quietly pressuring media outlets not to run the story. But they were too late. By Wednesday morning, the email had been confirmed by 2 independent reporters and published in full by an international investigative news site, one that had previously covered royal institutional failings. The headline read, "Weaponizing the Spare Inside Prince Andrew's Plot Against the Sussexes." The response was immediate and nuclear. Sabotage within trended globally. Editorials across major platforms shifted their tone, accusing the palace or factions within it of enabling manipulative power games while continuing to protect Andrew, a man whose own scandals had all but exiled him from public life. Public fury centered on a glaring question. Why was the royal family tolerating a scheme to damage the Sussexes, but had worked so hard to protect Andrew from facing real consequences for the Epstein fallout? For many, it exposed not just a family fracture, but a hierarchy of protection, one that punished defiance but sheltered disgrace. And at the center of it all, Meghan remained silent. But insiders confirmed she was anything but idle. According to 2 sources close to Archewell, Meghan had received a briefing on the email the night before it went public. She had not commented, not even privately, but reportedly spent the next morning on back-to-back calls with her US-based communications team. One source said only this: she's not angry, she's surgical. She knows exactly what to do next. Meanwhile, back in London, William had reportedly convened an emergency meeting with his senior aides, insisting that the palace get ahead of the narrative before the family's public image took irreparable damage. The problem, however, was that no unified message could be agreed upon, not when the cracks within the institution had now been laid bare for the world to see. And then came the final blow. A major women's advocacy conference, one that had already secured Meghan as a keynote speaker, updated its press release to reflect urgent narrative realignment, hinting that her upcoming appearance would address themes of betrayal, public perception, and resilience from within trusted institutions. It was clear Meghan was about to break her silence. And with Meghan poised to speak not in defense, but in revelation, the world braces for what may be her most calculated public statement yet, one that could either rebuild trust or rupture the monarchy's last layer of credibility. It was Friday morning when the cover dropped, striking, composed, and undeniably intentional. Meghan Markle, centered in a full-page profile for The Atlantic, sat alone against a muted backdrop, gaze direct, posture poised. The headline beneath her name was just 3 words: still standing, still watching. The interview, conducted before the sabotage email went public but edited in time to include its fallout, did not offer fireworks, no explosive allegations, no finger-pointing, but instead something far more powerful: clarity wrapped in restraint. Asked directly whether she believed certain members of the royal family had actively worked to harm her and Prince Harry's reputation, Meghan didn't answer with names. Instead, she said what hurts most isn't cruelty, it's calculation disguised as concern. She did not mention Prince Andrew. She didn't have to. The subtext ran like a current beneath every sentence. That betrayal, when it comes from within the family, cuts deeper than anything a headline could ever manage. That protection isn't given to the innocent, but reserved for the obedient. And that power, when threatened, doesn't retreat. It retaliates. Public response was immediate and sharply divided. Supporters praised the piece as one of Meghan's most measured, emotionally intelligent statements, to date a quiet but forceful rejection of the narrative that painted her as disruptive or manipulative. Others criticized it for being too curated, too polished, a performance dressed as resilience. But perhaps that's exactly what she intended. In refusing to escalate, Meghan did something more subversive. She positioned herself not as the victim or the villain, but as the observer, the one who had seen how the institution works, how it protects its own, and how it spins silence into strategy. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the fallout continued. Royal advisors remained under pressure to address the leaked email, with public calls for accountability growing louder by the hour. William's team reportedly drafted an internal review request, but hesitated to take it public, fearing a precedent they could not control. Andrew predictably retreated once again, neither confirming nor denying his role in the provocation plan. His public silence now spoke volumes, his once muted disgrace deepened by exposure not of scandal, but strategy. And Harry, he remained characteristically absent from the noise, choosing not to add further commentary beyond his earlier denial. But sources close to the couple confirm he was the first to read Meghan's article before it went to print and had only one note: "Say exactly what you want, no edits from me." In the end, the drama revealed something far bigger than a family feud. It showed a monarchy in crisis, not because of one prince's rage or one duchess's public platform, but because the system built to control narrative from within is no longer working. The media can't be managed, the exiled can still speak, and even the disgraced can manipulate from the shadows. But it also revealed the divide among the public itself. Because now a new question takes center stage. Is Harry still a reckless, emotionally driven royal who invites chaos wherever he goes? Or is he a man pushed to the edge by a system determined to make him crack? And Meghan, is she a manipulative opportunist who plays the victim to fuel her brand? Or a woman forced to navigate institutional gaslighting with surgical precision?